Imagine being humiliated in front of everyone at your own party, your husband laughing while everyone stares, thinking no one would ever come to your rescue. That was Emma's nightmare. She stood frozen, her hands on her growing belly, as Ryan, her husband, mocked her weight and whispered cruel jokes that made the room fall silent. The luxury of the Manhattan apartment, the sparkling decorations, the laughter of friends and relatives, all of it turned into a stage for her shame. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. Emma Harper was only 28, kind-hearted, and excited to welcome her first child. She had married Ryan Maddox, 32, who at first seemed charming and loving. But now, standing in the middle of the room, she realized he had a cruel side she had ignored for too long. Ryan thrived on showing others that he was in control, that he could embarrass her, and no one would challenge him. He laughed as if the tears welling in her eyes were part of a joke, completely oblivious to how wrong he was. She felt a deep, sharp sting in her chest, but she held her composure. Emma had learned from her parents that dignity mattered, even in the worst situations. She quietly told herself not to react, not to give him the satisfaction of a response. Ryan thought he had won, that no one in her powerful family would intervene. He didn't know Emma's brothers were always protective, watching over her silently even when he believed he had the upper hand. The whispers in the room grew louder. Guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, some unsure how to react, others clearly shocked by Ryan's boldness. Emma could feel every pair of eyes on her, but instead of breaking, she focused on something else: hope. She hoped her brothers, Lucas and Gavin Harper, would hear about this, though she hadn't called yet. She wanted them to see the man she had married for who he really was. Emma's heart pounded as she took a deep breath. Even though she felt small and humiliated in that moment, she knew she wasn't alone. She had grown up in a family that protected each other, that never let injustice go unanswered. For now, she kept her head high, pretending nothing had happened while planning her next move. Ryan smiled smugly, certain he had crushed her spirit, not knowing that the storm was already on its way. Even in that painful, humiliating moment, Emma felt a spark of power. She was about to show him that appearances could be deceiving and that his arrogance had blinded him to the strength of the woman he thought he controlled. Ryan left Emma standing there, smirking as if he had just won some cruel game. He mingled with the guests, laughing and joking, while Emma quietly felt the weight of his betrayal. She remembered all the small ways he had hurt her before, how he dismissed her opinions, lied about money, and made her feel small in private while pretending to be perfect in public. Each memory stung, but she stayed calm. She couldn't let him see how deeply he had cut her. As she watched him, Emma realized she had married a man who loved control more than love. He didn't care about her feelings or her growing child. All he cared about was showing everyone around him that he was the man in charge. But Emma was stronger than he thought. She took a steadying breath, reminding herself that humiliation was only temporary. Revenge could be permanent. Her mind drifted to her family.
Emma had always been close to her brothers, Lucas and Gavin Harper. Lucas, 35, was a tech billionaire with a sharp mind and a calm, intimidating presence. Gavin, 33, was ruthless in business and fiercely loyal to family. Both had always protected her quietly, and she knew they would never let anyone treat her like this without consequences. Ryan thought he had broken her, but in reality, he had just underestimated the people standing silently behind her life, the ones who could turn his arrogance against him. Emma felt a spark of hope, realizing that help was closer than he imagined. She didn't need to confront him directly. Her family could handle that. The whispers around the room made Ryan feel powerful, but they also showed him something else. People were noticing his cruelty. Emma's silence spoke louder than any argument. It hinted at the storm coming for him. She could see the slight discomfort on some guests' faces, and it gave her confidence. This wasn't just about embarrassment anymore, it was about justice. Even though Emma's heart ached, she felt a growing determination. Ryan had believed that he could humiliate her and move on, but she knew every action had a reaction. His arrogance would have a price, and when her brothers arrived, he would see just how wrong he had been. She kept her eyes on him, calm and quiet, waiting for the right moment. Emma's mind was clear. She would survive this, and Ryan would regret ever thinking he could control her. She would endure the shame, but she would not let it define her. Her strength, her family, and her unborn child gave her power that Ryan could never touch. Emma quietly stepped away from the crowd, her heart still racing, knowing that humiliation had only begun. She reached for her phone and called her brother Lucas. His calm voice on the other end made her feel a little safer. She didn't need to explain everything. He could sense when she was in trouble. Lucas promised he would handle it and told her to stay put. Almost immediately, Emma's second brother, Gavin, called, having already learned about the situation from Lucas. Lucas and Gavin arrived faster than Ryan could have imagined. Neither made a scene. They simply entered the room, their presence alone changing the atmosphere. Lucas was 35, tall and composed, with eyes that seemed to look right through people. Gavin, 33, had a quiet intensity that could make anyone nervous. Guests whispered nervously, sensing that something serious was about to happen. Ryan laughed at first, thinking his victory was still secure. He didn't recognize the look in their eyes, the kind of calm confidence that only comes from power and absolute loyalty. He had humiliated Emma, but he had no idea that her brothers were billionaires, people used to handling problems with precision and quiet force. Emma felt a rush of relief just seeing them. Their arrival gave her strength she hadn't realized she still had. She stood taller, her back straight, and for the first time that evening she felt protected. Ryan, however, was still smiling, unaware that the balance of power had just shifted. The room fell silent as Lucas and Gavin walked slowly toward the center, their eyes locked. Emma stayed back, her heart pounding, knowing her family would do what needed to be done. Ryan tried to maintain his arrogance, but a small flicker of unease crossed his face. He could feel the weight of the brothers' presence even before they said anything. Emma realized that sometimes strength doesn't shout, it simply arrives. And right now, it had arrived. For the first time that evening, Emma felt a sense of control. She didn't need to beg for respect or explanation. Lucas and Gavin were here, and they were ready to protect her, to make sure Ryan understood that his actions had consequences. In that moment, Emma understood something important. Humiliation can be temporary, but power and loyalty can change everything. Ryan had believed he could humiliate her with no repercussions, but he hadn't counted on her family, and he had underestimated her. The tension in the room became almost unbearable as Lucas and Gavin approached Ryan. He still tried to laugh, to act like nothing was wrong, but the atmosphere had shifted completely. Guests who had been watching curiously now felt the unease in the air. Ryan realized something he hadn't expected. He wasn't in control anymore. Emma stayed back, her hands resting on her belly, watching silently. She felt a mix of fear and relief. Fear because she had no idea exactly how her brothers would handle this, and relief because she knew they would protect her. Lucas and Gavin moved with quiet confidence, their presence alone making Ryan's smug smile falter. Ryan opened his mouth to say something, but Gavin cut him off with a calm, steady voice that carried more authority than any yelling could. Lucas didn't speak yet. He simply stood beside his brother, arms folded, eyes locked on Ryan. The silence was louder than any words, and Ryan could feel it pressing down on him. Emma felt a strange sense of power herself. She hadn't needed to speak. Her brother's presence was speaking for her. Ryan had humiliated her publicly, but now he was the one on the edge, unsure, nervous, and finally realizing that he had misjudged the situation completely. Guests began to whisper, some shocked, some curious, all watching as the balance of power shifted. Ryan had always thought his charm and wealth could shield him from consequences, but Lucas and Gavin were the opposite of what he expected: strategic, patient, and dangerous when necessary. Emma felt her heart steady. The shame and fear she had carried moments ago were fading. She realized that she was no longer just the victim of humiliation. She had a plan, a support system, and the power of her family on her side. Ryan, for the first time, looked genuinely worried. She could see the cracks in his composure now. Every smirk, every joke he had made earlier seemed to vanish under the calm pressure of her brother's presence. Emma understood that humiliation could only be temporary, but the consequences of betrayal could last much longer. For the first time that evening, she allowed herself a small, quiet smile. The moment she had feared was turning into the moment she had secretly hoped for. Ryan had underestimated her strength, and underestimated the loyalty and power of the Ryan tried desperately to defend himself, saying it was just a joke and that everyone was overreacting, but no one seemed to believe him anymore. The calm authority of Lucas and Gavin had already shifted everyone's perception. Guests looked at him differently now. He was no longer the confident, charming man he had pretended to be. Lucas, calm and composed, pointed out things Ryan had overlooked in his business dealings, while Gavin reminded him of debts and promises he had failed to honor. The quiet way they dismantled his power made Ryan panic inside. No yelling, no confrontation, just calculated moves that slowly stripped him of control. Emma felt a wave of satisfaction. She didn't need to shout or make threats. The strength of her family and the consequences of Ryan's betrayal were already at work. He had humiliated her, but now it was his turn to feel the weight of his mistakes. Ryan tried to argue, to regain some semblance of dominance, but every attempt fell flat. His charm and bravado meant nothing here. He had underestimated Emma, her intelligence, and the loyalty of her brothers. Every calm statement they made was like a hammer striking at the foundation of the arrogance he had built around himself. The room had shifted completely. Guests now watched Ryan with curiosity and unease. The man who had publicly humiliated Emma was now exposed as weak, unsure, and trapped by his own misjudgment. Emma felt a quiet sense of triumph, knowing she had endured the shame but had emerged stronger. Even in her exhaustion and hurt, Emma realized something important. Revenge didn't need to be loud or violent. It could be quiet, strategic, and unstoppable. Her brother's actions were already ensuring Ryan would never forget this night, and she could finally breathe, knowing that justice was unfolding. For the first time since the party began, Emma felt true relief. She was safe, supported, and empowered, while Ryan was facing the consequences he had ignored for far too long. The balance had shifted completely, and she knew nothing would ever be the same. Ryan was desperate now. He tried everything he could think of, pleading, explaining, even smiling awkwardly, but nothing worked. The calm authority of Lucas and Gavin had stripped away every bit of control he thought he had. He realized finally that his arrogance had been his biggest mistake. Guests whispered among themselves, sensing the shift. The man who had once commanded attention with charm and bravado was now shrinking under the weight of his own actions. Every word Lucas and Gavin spoke, every subtle move they made, left Ryan more exposed, more powerless. Emma watched quietly, her heart steady. She had felt fear and shame earlier, but now she felt something stronger: pride. She had endured humiliation and she had kept her dignity. Ryan had tried to break her spirit, but he had only revealed her strength. Ryan tried one last time to salvage his image, but his efforts fell flat. His words sounded hollow, and the guests could see right through him. Every attempt he made only reminded everyone present of the cruelty he had shown Emma. The room's energy had completely shifted, and Ryan knew it. Emma felt a quiet satisfaction. She didn't need to shout or fight. She had survived, and her family had handled the rest. Ryan's panic and desperation were proof that justice was being served. She realized that sometimes the most effective revenge isn't loud or public. It's precise, strategic, and inevitable. Her brothers stood tall beside her, their presence alone enough to keep Ryan in check. Emma understood that this was the moment when humiliation turned into empowerment. Ryan had underestimated her family, and underestimated the consequences of his betrayal. For Emma, the lesson was clear. Strength, patience, and the support of loved ones could turn even the worst moments into triumph. Ryan had humiliated her publicly, but now, quietly, he was the one being humiliated, powerless and exposed for all to see. The realization filled her with a sense of calm victory. She had survived the storm of embarrassment and cruelty, and she had come out stronger, protected, and empowered. Ryan had finally learned the hard way that actions have consequences, and no amount of charm or wealth could shield him from the reckoning he had brought upon himself. The party slowly returned to its normal rhythm, but Ryan no longer held any power. Guests quietly kept their distance, unsure whether to feel sympathy or judgment. Emma stood tall, supported by Lucas and Gavin, knowing she had survived not just humiliation, but a deeper betrayal. Ryan was isolated, his arrogance stripped away. He had thought that mocking Emma would leave her broken, but in reality it had revealed his own weaknesses. He had underestimated her strength, the loyalty of her family, and the consequences of his actions. Now he was the one facing the aftermath of his cruelty. Emma felt a deep sense of relief. She had endured the worst, kept her dignity, and allowed justice to unfold quietly but powerfully. She was pregnant, yet stronger than she had ever been, surrounded by her protective and loving brothers. She realized that sometimes life's harshest moments reveal our true strength. For Emma, this was more than revenge. It was empowerment. She had faced betrayal head-on, witnessed the consequences of cruelty, and reclaimed her place in her own life. Ryan had lost everything he thought he controlled, and Emma had gained the respect and peace she deserved. Her brothers stayed close, a steady reminder that she was never alone. Emma smiled quietly, understanding that loyalty, patience, and strategic strength could turn even the deepest humiliation into triumph. Ryan had publicly tried to destroy her, but in the end, it was he who had been exposed, humiliated, and left powerless. As the night ended, Emma felt lighter. The storm of betrayal had passed, leaving her stronger, wiser, and ready to protect herself and her child. She walked out of the party with her head held high, knowing that her family and her own inner strength had turned what seemed like a nightmare into a story of justice, resilience, and empowerment. Emma's story wasn't just about revenge, it was about survival, dignity, and the power of standing strong when everything seems lost. Ryan had learned a lesson he would never forget, and Emma had discovered a strength she would carry forever.